My name is Colonel William B. Allison. In 1845, I bought a plantation on the headwaters of Little Allison Creek, and shortly thereafter, I married Mary Susan Currents. In 1861, I enlisted in the Confederate States Army and served as a lieutenant colonel with the 18th South Carolina Volunteers. We were involved in campaigns in Mississippi, Georgia, Florida. We saw heavy fighting around Petersburg and Richmond. Following the war, I returned here to my farm to become a surveyor. So, being a South Carolina native, born and raised in York County, I'd like to give you a little history of this area. Not far from here was what used to be called Hill's Iron Works. Sir William Hill, a native of Northern Ireland, settled in York, Pennsylvania. And then in 1762, he came to York, South Carolina. And Mr. Hill, right before the Revolutionary War, received money from the South Carolina General Assembly to build his ironworks plantation. He also acquired land grants totaling 5,000 acres, but over the next 30 years would increase to 24,000 acres. But you see, Mr. Hill needed more than money and land to build his ironworks. He needed iron ore, which came from Nanny's Mountain. He needed charcoal, which came from the forest to fuel the fire in his furnaces. And he needed laborers. Mr. Hill sent for 100 slaves from another ironworks, and Isaac Hayne of Charleston provided 40 more slaves. So by the time the Revolutionary War started, Hill's Ironworks was turning out cannonballs to fight the British. Now, Captain Huck led British troops into York County and completely destroyed Hill's Ironworks, burning everything to the ground. Huck also confiscated 90 slave laborers from the plantation. It would be 6 years before Hill could find the funds to rebuild. In 1787, 50 slaves from Tory estates were awarded to Hill for his losses during the war. Hill's Ironworks stayed in operation until around 1810, when there were no more trees left to burn to fuel the furnaces. William Hill died in 1816, leaving everything to his sons. Now, I've told you about one war that came through here, but there was another war here that ended in 1865 after 4 years of furious fighting. Some folks call it the Civil War. Some folks call it the war between the states. But I like to call it the War of Northern Aggression. Anyway, after the war, the South entered a very dark period. You see, we had lost the war to the North, and Reconstruction had begun. 4 million slaves had their freedom, but many here in the South did not see how they could give equal rights to people they had called coloreds and Negroes and used for so many years as slaves and servants. Now, federal law required Southern states to consent to the 14th Amendment, which broadened the definition of citizenship, granting equal protection under the Constitution to former slaves. Then Congress approved the 15th Amendment, guaranteeing Negroes the right to vote. Well, that may have been just fine up north, but here in the South, especially in York County, violence would be the response to these radical changes. The Ku Klux Klan and other organizations targeted local Republican leaders, black and white. The Klan continued to attack and persecute blacks for years after the war. But men like Jim Williams, Elias Hill, Solomon Hill, and June Moore fought for the equal rights of blacks in York County. Together, they established a black militia called the Union League, but they were no match for the hundreds of Klansmen. On February the 12th, 1871, 500 to 700 men dressed in black robes and masks killed 8 black men. On March 6th, Jim Williams was seized from his home, hung from a tree, and then Klansmen raided several other homes of Union League members looking for weapons. Another Klan attack involved Solomon Hill and June Moore. So, Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer dispatched half of his 7th Cavalry to South Carolina. Under the command of Major Lewis Merrill, they were tasked with controlling the situation, but they were unable to protect the black citizens of York County. Then on May 5th, the Klan raided Elias Hill's home, dragged him into the yard, and beat him with their fists and horsewhips within an inch of his life. 8 days after the attack, Major Merrill went before community leaders demanding change. And although the violence continued throughout that summer, Merritt's efforts would eventually lead to the dismantling of the KKK in York County.